Welcome to another edition of Adam Shand at Large. On a summer's day in January 2012, Tina Greer was meant to pick up her teenage daughter Lilli from a friend's house. The Gold Coast mum had spent the day with her boyfriend, outlaw bikie Les Sharman. Tina's relationship with Sharman was troubled. The bikie had subjected her to years of psychological and physical violence. Tina never arrived to pick up her daughter, and her remains have never been found. Although it was suspected Sharman murdered Tina, he was never formally interviewed by police and died in 2018 in a car accident. Sadly, the Queensland Coroner ruled there would be no public benefit to holding an inquest. Enter Tina's daughter, Lilli, now grown up and determined to see justice for her mum. Lilli Greer campaigned hard, and she was rewarded when the coroner overturned that decision. There will now be an inquest into Tina Greer's case. I get so many worthy cases that don't make inquest and deal with families who never get a formal acknowledgement of how their loved ones perished, or how others can avoid the same fate by highlighting flaws in our system of law and social welfare. So this story is one to cherish. Life is full of disappointments and things we can't change, but we make a choice to be discouraged, and Lilli Greer has never done that. And she's my guest today. Hi, Lilli.
Hi.
Thanks for your time. Tell me about your mum.
My mum was a young mum, very fiery lady, very active, and yeah, just always down to do the fun kid stuff with me, like jumping on the trampoline, just get your hands dirty type of mum.
And you're extremely close. Where was your dad?
I didn't meet my dad until last year.
That's another story, isn't it? We'll get there a
Yeah.
bit later on.
Yeah.
You're full of stories. Full of
There's too
stories.
many stories, yeah.
So what is your last memory of mum on that January day in 2012?
Basically, it was leading up to her disappearance was quite a stressful time in our lives. So it was a mixture of excitement and stress, you could say. Basically, we had been stalked in the lead up to her disappearance, but on that particular day, the last day I saw her, we were actually just going school shopping. And yeah, so we just went to the shops with my friend and her mum and my mum, and then basically bought some school supplies, some school shoes, and she and I went back to our house. I got some clothes to pack to visit my friend, and then she dropped all of us back to their house or near the house. And yeah, I just said bye and then see you tomorrow type of thing.
And you were that close that you kept in touch. She didn't leave you for extended periods. When did you start to become concerned that something had happened to her?
The concern started when she was like an hour late. Basically, my friend and I were probably doing the wrong thing, and what had happened was we wanted to go to this lake nearby her house, and we weren't supposed to, but we were like walking back along the road, and I was like ready for her car because that's the way her car would have been coming. I was like, oh, she's gonna like catch us, and she's gonna be annoyed that I'm like walking back with my friend, unsupervised. So we made it back before she got back, and I was like, we were running late. So I was like, oh my God, she's not here. Why isn't she here? She hasn't messaged me, because we were very like in regular contact. Even when she didn't have custody of me, I had like a secret phone and we'd talk every day. So very, very tight knit communication. So then the alarm bells did start ringing straight away.
So was there a period where she didn't have custody of you? Where were you at that time?
I lived with my grandparents for that time. It's for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a sad story, I suppose. Yeah, it was this whole battle for 5 or 6 years for her to regain custody and for us to, have the goal of living together. It was, really triumphant once we started living together again, which was the house that, I last saw her at. So we only got to live together for about 8 weeks before she went missing.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, it's a sad
And
one.
there was documented examples
Mm,
of Sharman
mm.
assaulting your mother that that were very clear. What were those?
The few that are in the coroner's report, there's many more, but the ones that are discussed in the coroner's report are essentially neighbours had reported the abuse, which is, when you think about it, it was quite extreme abuse because they lived in a rural area in Queensland, in Columba, when they were living together, and there's virtually no people. The first one was they had reported they saw a woman running down the road and him trying to run her over, that woman being my mum. And the second one was, I believe they saw her again on the road with like blood on her. And yeah, basically the police attended both times and she didn't report him because obviously she's scared for her life. But the coroner's court and police didn't see it like that.
And you're right, because she gave the police a cover story that she'd
Mm,
injured herself mowing,
mowing, yeah.
and she was clearly in fear of her life, though. Sharman posed a lethal threat to her.
Extremely lethal. Like, those are just two documented events, but she had called me a number of times in fear for her life and was certain like she was going to be murdered.
This was an on-off relationship. Why do you think your mother couldn't get away from him?
That's the nature of most abusive relationships. It's a toxic cycle that is extremely hard to break. And we've got a lot of research at the moment that shows that women are faced with a choice between being homeless and extreme poverty or living with another reason, many, is that she had nothing, like virtually nothing. And every time she did leave, she was hounded relentlessly, threatened, abused, and I guess the outcome of this story was she was murdered. We had left as a result of that. We had been stalked and her car vandalized. It's really extreme stuff.
So, as the hours and I guess then days pass by, as there's no sign of your mother, you must have been thinking the worst. And your world that was so recently put together with your mother only 8 weeks before, and was suddenly just the rug was pulled out from under you.
Mm, for sure.
What happened next?
Uh, it was very traumatic. It was it kind of all rolled into one. Like, I can't remember it that well, like the specific days, but it was strange. The Les Sharman, he actually went to the place where I was staying and said like, she's gone, I can't find her, and he seemed to be like upset and potentially intoxicated, and he went to see myself and the people I was with before we were interviewed by the police. And I just remember being, a 13-year-old, and this dude's here, thinking, why aren't you coming to be interviewed by the police? And I like said that to him, and he was like, no, I'll just wait for my lawyer. And yeah, so he didn't go that night. I was interviewed by the police. And then, from my perspective, because I was so young, I wasn't really involved in any of the investigative stuff from then on. So I was just kind of in the dark, and I found out a lot of it from TV, what was happening with the case. It was really, really traumatic to find out that way. But yeah, that's how it went down.
And the suspicions were cast upon Sharman from the very beginning because of this history of violence. And I
Mm.
guess one might have been expecting that he'd be questioned or even more, but none of that happened. Do you know why?
I didn't even know he wasn't questioned until I got the coroner's report, like formally questioned. I had no knowledge of that. I had been thinking, for the past 10 years that he was questioned. Um, so everyone, yeah, it's a fact. Like, she had told everybody she knew and was close with that this was going to happen to her. It was just a matter of when.
And police were made aware of this. I mean, this is the old story. This is only what 11 years ago, but it's such a
Mm.
familiar story. A woman under threat goes missing. Police say, well, she must have taken off. Maybe she's gone to stay with a friend. maybe she's gone interstate. But the
Mm,
fact is, the first 48 hours in a homicide case are the most important. Yet
mm.
the attitude to these women in these cases is, we'll get to it in a couple of days. This could have made all the difference.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it was actually reported in those first 3 days. I think because to be honest, my family even thought that they didn't want to. To be honest, a pretty dysfunctional family, like the extended family, but I don't think anyone really wanted to believe it. So that's another, it ended up being like 5 days until legitimate searching was being done.
Yeah. Well, show me any family, I'll show you dysfunction, actually, but let's not go
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So not much happens by the sounds of things. And I guess you get snippets of information. There are theories. People come to your family with certain bits of information, but really the decision is that she's a missing person. So what
Yeah.
happens to you in that period?
At the beginning, I lived with my friends, the people who I was staying with, and my life went quickly downhill, as you can imagine. No real like parental supervision and no emotional coping skills at this point in my life. So I made a lot of bad decisions from the age of 13 and was drinking, and just my life was going poorly. So I decided to leave where I was staying and stay with my uncle. Then from there, I just lived with basically all my uncles until I was 18.
And you've made a tremendous success from a pretty ordinary start. You're now working in the area of domestic violence and family violence. How much is that career decision based on what
Mm.
happened to your mum?
Yeah, it's directly related. Um, it's funny, the day I actually found out that there wasn't going to be an inquest was the day I got my job offer. So that's a bit of serendipity, I suppose. Yeah, it's directly related. I think after going through this process and watching my mom be abused and hearing about it on the phone, because she'll call me and I was kind of her sounding board, really her like emotional support during that time, because she was very isolated from her family and community. I just thought this is where I need to be, and I'm really suited for this type of work.
And where are you working now?
I work at a called Mary's House Services.
And dealing with just the same sort of cases as your mother was, I presume.
Yeah, I mean everyone's story is a little bit different, but it's essentially women and children fleeing abusive relationships.
Because when you look back through this prism of having worked in the area now, you can
Mm.
see all the deficiencies, the mistakes, the missed opportunities, the lack of basic care for your mum.
Oh yeah, it's negligent. Um, it was there's no question about it. That's why the inquest, or getting to the inquest, has been successful, because I really didn't need to prove much, because it's written down they wrote it down themselves. Yeah, it's anyone that has no background in domestic violence or can just read, it's pretty obvious to see that there's negligence and many missed opportunities.
Well, the biggest missed opportunity of all, Mr. Sharman is available for interview. He's not gone overseas.
Mm-hmm.
He's not dead yet. 6 years pass, not
Yeah.
interviewed, not charged, no result. So 2018, he dies in a car accident, age 60, and all hope of you and the community seeing justice is gone. How did that feel?
It was a really bad day. I had a call from a family member and they were really happy, and I just cried because yeah, I had that exact thought. This man knows he did it, and what chance do we have now finding out what happened? And a lot of people were happy because justice, he got what was coming for him, but no, that I would have rathered him rot in jail rather than die.
And most particularly, reveal where your mother's remains were left.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the hardest thing in these cases, because so much of our spiritual life and our understanding of life and death is around the funeral process,
Mm.
the physical evidence of death and the movement to the next stage of our existence or non-existence. So
Yeah.
tell me what it's like not to have those rituals, not to see your mother rest in peace, even though she might have died violently, that you can have a ritual around that death, which provides meaning and purpose for those going forward.
Mm. It's an extremely mentally taxing place to be in. It's now called and phrased as ambiguous loss because it's this like limbo state that you're in where you don't know and you can't actually go through those grieving processes that you get to go through when you lose a person. So I actually started as a child. I just started coming up with my own rituals to kind of get through it. Um, like letters. My mum and I had a ritual of writing each other letters when we didn't live together. So I just continued writing those letters, but I actually just sent them to his address where he lived. One just for her and myself, but I also hoped he'd read them and feel guilty. And yeah, so when he died, I just started burying the letters. But yeah, and then 2020, I think 2021, I had a memorial for her just so I could mentally close it off and have that for myself.
As best you could do. I guess in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind is the possibility the Queensland Coroner may get involved here and hold an inquest, you knew Mr. Sharman was responsible, but to hear it from the bench in black and white, in the records, is a very important thing. Again, in that process of, I don't want to say closure. I think closure is a bullshit word, to be honest.
Yeah,
No
I
one
hate
ever
that word.
closes from violent death and
Yeah.
nonsense, but to some respect and acknowledgement.
Yeah, so it was nice to know and just have into what the police had done and the coroner's court, their stance on it. So it was good to hear or read that she had, in fact, been murdered by him, which, yeah, I already knew. But then that's paired with the fact that they're not going to continue to look into the investigation when there was clear flaws. And then, yeah, as we spoke about before, them saying that her death was not preventable and not in the public interest to investigate. That's where this kind of fire inside me got ignited.
I'm sure because, this is the Queensland Coroner, but operating in a different dimension. If they're going to say that there's no public benefit to examining the flaws in protecting domestic violence victims and for police investigations, this is what the coroner's other function is. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just about apportioning blame to events. It's actually looking at how the system can be improved. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very important part.
Extremely important. And as you could imagine, I was gobsmacked. They didn't want to hold an inquest. So, in the initial phases of trying to advocate for an inquest, I was speaking directly to the coroner's court. And I asked the lady who I was speaking to, I was like, what do you think? And she said, the time, blah, 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 blah. Like, it just nothing could have been done. And we know from research that there's plenty of points where intervention does save lives. And yeah, following all of those conversations, it became very evident that there is no actual domestic violence training within the coroner's court, and especially in Queensland, it's like the highest state for domestic violence deaths. And yeah, they have no training, well, organizational training and understanding and awareness of domestic violence. And it's like you deal with people dying every day of these causes, and you're not educated on it. Very strange.
But you did not lie down with this. You did not give up. What happened next?
I was very angry, and yeah, I didn't know if I was like crazy and just not being able to deal with the process. But yeah, again, it was all in writing. So I just decided I would take it into my own hands and start the Tina Greer project, which essentially the whole initial goal was to draw attention to my mum's case and get an inquest, but to raise awareness for victims of homicide and domestic violence and missing persons, because that's the areas that this case crosses over. So yeah, I started a petition, just a change.org petition, and started through social media advocacy, like hardcore, It was my existence for about 6 months there, and was successful and got a meeting with the Attorney General, got some lawyers, and just started really researching and having my ducks in a row for this meeting. And I ultimately had the meeting and was able to be seen by someone. She's Shannon Sentiment. She's also the Minister for Women in Queensland. So she is aware of domestic violence, thankfully. So I had a good audience, and she was very sympathetic and wrote to the coroner's court, as well as my lawyers, preparing like a brief to give to them, and then the petition as well, showing there's public interest. There's over 20,000 signatures here from the public, showing that this case deserves to be opened and go to inquest.
Because there's that old saying that when you know where you're going, the world gets out of your way. And that's what you've done. You set a course, you stuck to it. What was it like that day how were you informed that there would be an inquest?
I got a email, at work. They're not very chatty, the coroner's court. They don't like to tell you anything. It's just the emails. Yeah, it was surreal. I was very much so prepared to just keep going. I was kind of shocked. It almost felt like too easy. Yeah, it's just the nature of these things, and having to deal with this for the past 11 years. You get one win and you get pushed back 7. So it was good. It was a bit surreal, but I also worked really hard for it, and it was you'd have to be blind to see that, like, to disagree.
So what are you expecting from this inquest? How much information do you think is there? You've had a look at some files. You probably saw what the police did. What are you
I haven't
expecting in
yet.
this inquest? Oh, you haven't yet?
No, it's so slow. Everything is very slow. So yeah, we got told that there would be an inquest December, and then typical, you get told we're going to give you the brief of evidence next week, and I think that was like a month and a half ago. So I'm still waiting for the brief of evidence, but we'll get the brief of evidence, myself and my lawyers, and then it's a bit scary because I was so young. I get to see what the police did and who they interviewed, but I know a few people that weren't interviewed that could be of importance to the case. However, there's also a lot of things I don't know about my mum's life, as I was so young. So it's a real struggle right now is to find more links and information that could be of assistance to the inquest.
No, that's right. What you're prepared for. And this is interesting, isn't it? Because this cuts both ways. It's not just the evidence in the file. It's also people that knew Mr. Sharman, knew your mother, and they could be prevailed upon to finally give some evidence. Are you prepared for disappointment that it might not be what you expected it to be?
Yes, I am. So we found out there was an inquest, and then from the coroner's side, there's a few and how are you supposed to know until you go through it? But there's a person called the counsel assisting, which kind of like liaises with the family and the coroner's court, and they kind of like direct the whole thing. So I found out that the counsel assisting was actually a woman who I had spoken to about my mum's case, and I had asked her directly, what do you think about it? And she said that it shouldn't go to inquest, and she's reviewed everything. I found out that she's the counsel assisting, and I was like, how small is the coroner's court? How is this possible? Thankfully, it just got changed last week, so that is another small win amongst some setbacks. So that's really positive it got changed, but yeah, it's a lot of pressure with the having to work with the coroner's court, and hopefully they'll listen to the people who I'd like to be interviewed. But yeah, so again, the police didn't do much in the time that it was critical to do a lot. So there's a lot of gaps in what's happened. I haven't seen the whole brief of evidence, but for instance, I know like a number of people that haven't been interviewed that were very close to him. So I can bring forward those people, and hopefully they find it in their hearts to give forward and come forward with information. But disappointment, to get to your question, I'm very prepared because of the type of man he was. He wouldn't have told many people. He would have been smart about it. I'm pretty confident that her body isn't intact just from hearing his conversations and watching him as a person. Pretty cruel, and I wouldn't be surprised if her body is not in one piece. So finding it will be difficult if it is and can be found. But I guess the main thing I want to come out of it is to really highlight the discrepancies and the missed opportunities and prevent future deaths like this from happening and help other people that are going through similar processes.
Will you have your own counsel?
Yeah, I have lawyers, so hopefully they to help me. I'm sure they will. It's just hard putting your trust in other people. It's been a long time. I feel like it's my responsibility to kind of make sure that it's done correctly. I know it's not, but that's how I feel. And yeah, I do have lawyers, but lawyers are interesting people too.
That's a whole nother podcast. But
Yeah.
you've got this far. You've got this far by not being put off, by making sure, not just relying on other people to say so, but so I'm sure you'll continue to do that. Bittersweet outcome as well. You've got in touch with your father, your birth father.
Yeah. He
Why after all these years?
in 2020, his father, my grandfather, saw me on the front cover of a newspaper and realized, yeah, that's my granddaughter, and then subsequently found me on social media. So it's been nice to know that I have other family out there, and yeah, it was good to meet my father after 23 years.
Dare I ask, have you formed a relationship, or is it a bit difficult?
No, not really. No, there's a lot of many other stories to go with that one, but it's good. He's a nice guy.
It's just great to be acknowledged, isn't it? And I think that's the same for your mother. I mean, what do you feel this inquest and this whole proceeding will mean for your mother and your mother's memory?
Justice, and just awareness, and it's just respect, in general, respecting someone's life, attributing the negative things that happened. The whole thing up until now has been a lot of victim blaming, and I have felt like I've had to protect my mum and her memory over these years just because of the public perceptions, how the media used to sway things. Yeah, there's just a whole lot of narratives surrounding, I'm sure it's like many other missing person cases and domestic violence cases. The whole, why didn't she leave? It's her fault. Why was she with a bikie? All of those things. So it's just respecting her life and knowing that she was more than what the media makes her out to be. And domestic violence is a very complicated thing to begin with. So understanding that the public, and it's just mainly the documentation of this is exactly what happened. Like any other person wouldn't have been able to escape. It's nothing simple.
I have to admit, when I asked you that question off the top, why didn't she leave? I could see your face just grimaced a little bit, because it is a question that women in this situation get asked and men don't understand. You now work in this area. You've got a greater insight. What is driving this choice or lack of choice?
Yeah, well, the question should be, why did he abuse her? Why is someone being violent? Not why aren't you leaving? That's what it needs to be. And people just don't, nobody thinks it can happen to them. And that's why, again, that's another layer of why people don't leave. They don't want to admit that they have loved somebody that's abusing them and they think it's their fault. Like you could write a book about why people don't leave. It's very different for everyone.
It's not a subtle change. It's a 180-degree change from the question of why didn't she leave to why is he abusing her? If the latter question had been asked by police, it's quite likely she'd be alive today.
Yeah, and again, because she never filed a restraining order, the onus was on her in terms of that's why they couldn't apparently at the time further investigate an interview with down his sorry, my English. They didn't essentially, my understanding of it was they didn't interview him because she hadn't filed a restraining order. That's the short version of what I was told. So yeah, again, why was she the one that had to file the restraining order? Can't you just interview the man, the last person to see her, who's a known criminal, who neighbours have reported abusing his partner? So yeah, again, it's just as we know, the recent investigations into Queensland Police, it's very evident that there is a need for domestic violence training and awareness.
Now, I would presume that Mr. Sharman, his family may know about the inquest, or his friends, or they may be listening to this podcast. What would be your message to them about any information they might have and what difference it will make even at this late stage?
Number one, I would say he has since passed away, so you don't need to fear ramifications from him. There's a whole family, myself, on the other side of this that needs answers. It's been very long and traumatic 11 years. I've literally, even recently, because the inquest is coming, every night I dream about a different way that she's died. Like, it's very intense. And just knowing that you could take that burden and horrible feeling away from so many people and give them some glimpse of, I guess, peace is a really nice thing to be able to provide someone. So I'd hope that from like a moral perspective that they would want to do that. But yeah, like obviously there's a lot of fear. He was a bikie, so people would be naturally scared to come forward. I've started posting on social media and like had some interesting messages come through, and yeah, the main consensus is like, don't tell anyone, this wasn't me, delete the messages. Yeah, it's just a whole lot of secrecy surrounding bikies and that whole concept of loyalty, and I'm never going to find out is the general vibe I get from even people that might not be bikies. But people know what happened. I know that there would be multiple people that do know what happened. It's just a matter of them finding it within their hearts to come forward. Even, yeah.
Well, you put yourself in the best possible place to have some outcomes here. You're in the coroner's court. The evidence will be looked at in a proper way. Lilli Greer, you're an inspiration. You're a champion to your mother. I've got a daughter a bit older than you, and I would hope that she fought as hard if I was to disappear in the same circumstances. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today on Adam Shand at Large, and the best of luck.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention, sorry, there's a $250,000 reward for anyone that can actually help locate her.
Well, there you go. Another reason, a $250,000 reward for information that leads to the knowledge of what happened to Tina Greer. Now, there's somebody out there who knows. Pick up the phone, call Crime Stoppers, 1-800-333-000. Mr. Sharman's gone, but Lilli remains. And if you want just a little insight into what Tina meant for Lilli, she's written a little poem for her mother, which we'll go out with in our episode. Just listen to this. And if that doesn't melt the hardest heart, then I don't know what will. Thanks for joining us today on Adam Shand at Large. Dear Mum, setting out to describe you is truly a task. No more pretending and hiding behind that mask. Today is for you through and through. I know it's not enough, but today we remember you. Losing you and I'm drowning in a black sea. I'll never explain all you truly mean to me. I hear your resilience in the hum of the ocean. The thrashing of falls shows me your devotion. I hear your voice in your letters, it's uncanny. You live on in the smell of vanilla candles and the frangipani. Sometimes I feel your hands stroking my face, like you once did with loving embrace. Whilst the end of the search approaches, you remind me you are here with your trademark roses. I still see your hope in the sunrise. Don't worry, Mum, I'll never forget all you symbolise. I will always hold you with the utmost esteem. Sometimes you even visit me while I dream. You remind me of our road trips and those movie nights. I'd give my life just to have you in my sights. We could spend hours talking at our beach. It's as though you're just out of my reach. Remembering the fun and planning of what's to come, I never got to thank you, and I'm sorry, Mum. I know in my heart you did all you could. I never fully understood in my childhood. You are my world, you are my inspiration. Through domestic violence, family abuse, and indoctrination. We always knew everything would be fine, so long as we had each other. Fuck the bloodline. Despite it all, you showed a brave face. Now it's been 9 years and still not a trace. My life is empty without your existence. I love you and the pain is far from a distance. A world without you is true devastation. You are in an unknown location with no indication. P.S. I love you. P.P.S. See you in my dreams. If you have any information that can assist the coroner, please call Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000 or contact Lilli direct at thetinagreerproject.com or on Instagram. You can find her handle there.